Right now, as you listen to these words, something is racing toward Mars at over 137,000 miles per hour. Something that should not exist. Something that has every major space agency scrambling for answers they refuse to give the public. 3I-ATLAS, the third confirmed visitor from beyond our solar system, is not following the path of a natural comet. It is following the trajectory of something with intention. While NASA tells us this interstellar interloper poses no threat to Earth, they have been suspiciously silent about what it might do to Mars. They have been even more silent about the growing body of evidence suggesting 3I-ATLAS might not be what it appears to be at all. Because what if this is not a comet? What if this is reconnaissance? What if right now we are witnessing the opening move in an invasion that has been 8,000 years in the making? The signs are already there, hidden in plain sight. 3I-ATLAS arrived from the direction of Sagittarius, from the thick disk of our galaxy where civilizations could have been thriving for billions of years before Earth even formed. It moves with the precision of a guided missile, not the chaotic tumble of space debris. Its trajectory will take it within 18 million miles of Mars, closer than any previous interstellar visitor has come to any planet in our solar system. And when it reaches that closest approach in just weeks, it will disappear behind the sun, hidden from every telescope on Earth for months. The timing is not coincidental. The positioning is not accidental. What happens during those hidden months may determine whether humanity has a future at all. Welcome to Science for Sleep, where tonight we explore the darkest possibilities science can imagine. I am your guide into a scenario so terrifying that every space agency on Earth is pretending it cannot happen. But it can happen. It might be happening right now. And by the time you finish listening to this investigation, you will understand why some scientists are not sleeping at all anymore. The story begins 8,000 years ago, when an ancient civilization faced the same choice that may soon confront us. Flee their dying world or perish with it. They chose to flee. They chose to survive. And they chose Mars as their destination, not because it was habitable, but because it could be made habitable. Because deep beneath its frozen surface, Mars holds secrets that make it the perfect world to conquer from within. But before we dive into the abyss of what 3I-ATLAS might really represent, I need you to do something crucial for this investigation. Hit that like button right now, because YouTube needs to know this content matters. Subscribe if you have not already, because this story is just beginning, and here is something new that can genuinely help this channel survive and bring you more deep investigations like this one. YouTube has rolled out a feature called the hype button. If you see that hype button, please use it. It costs you nothing but makes a massive difference for independent science content like this. Now, while you're here, tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there. Because if what we're about to explore is real, then the experiences people are having around the world might not be coincidences at all. The official story about 3I-ATLAS is carefully crafted to sound reassuring. A natural comet from another star system passing harmlessly through our cosmic neighborhood before continuing on its journey into the void. But every detail they give us raises more questions than it answers. Why does this comet show so little activity for something supposedly made of ice? Why does its trajectory align so perfectly with the orbital planes of Venus, Mars and Jupiter? Why has it grown a tail only now, conveniently providing the visual evidence needed to classify it as a comet? Most disturbing of all, why does every simulation of its path show that it could easily change course to reach Earth, but only during those months when it will be hidden behind the sun? The mathematics are terrifying in their precision. Atlas will reach its closest approach to our star on October 29th, placing it just inside the orbit of Mars. For the following 10 weeks it will be completely invisible from Earth, obscured by the blazing solar disk that makes observation impossible. During those 10 weeks, if Atlas were to fire even a modest propulsion system, it could slow down just enough to become gravitationally bound to our Sun. It could change from a visitor into a permanent resident. And once it has done that, reaching Earth becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The physics of this maneuver are elegantly simple. It is called a solar obirth effect, where a spacecraft fires its engines at the closest point to a star to maximize the change in velocity. Any civilization capable of interstellar travel would know this technique. They would plan for it, they would use it, and they would time it perfectly to occur when their target species could not observe what was happening. But why Mars? Why not come directly to Earth if the goal is invasion or colonization? The answer lies in what we've discovered about Mars in just the past few years. Discoveries that have fundamentally changed our understanding of what that world really is. Mars is not the dead, frozen wasteland we once believed. It is a sleeping giant, honeycombed with vast networks of underground chambers, flooded with liquid water, and teeming with the potential for life. It is in fact the perfect place to establish a hidden base of operations. Recent seismic data from NASA's InSight lander has revealed that Mars contains massive underground reservoirs of liquid water, more water than exists in all of Earth's oceans. This water sits in vast caverns and connected tunnel systems that extend for thousands of miles beneath the Martian surface. The temperature down there is stable, the pressure is manageable, and the environment is completely shielded from the deadly radiation that scours the surface. It is, quite literally, a ready-made underground civilization waiting for inhabitants. But here is what makes this discovery truly terrifying. The mathematical models show that these underground water systems could support not just microbial life, but complex ecosystems. They could support manufacturing, they could support massive populations, they could support the infrastructure needed to launch an assault on Earth, and they could do all of this completely invisible to our orbital surveillance, hidden beneath miles of rock and ice. If you were an ancient civilization fleeing your dying homeworld, if you had the technology for interstellar travel but needed somewhere to establish a new base of operations, Mars would be the obvious choice. Not because of what it is on the surface, but because of what it could become beneath it. The question is not whether Mars could hide an alien civilization. The question is whether it already does. The evidence has been accumulating for decades, hidden in plain sight within the data we collect from Mars every day. Unexplained seismic activity that follows patterns too regular to be natural. Atmospheric methane that appears and disappears in ways that suggest active production and consumption. Magnetic anomalies that move and shift as if something large were relocating beneath the surface. Most disturbing of all, infrared signatures that show heat sources far below the surface, in regions where no geological process should be generating warmth. NASA has explanations for all of these phenomena, explanations that sound reasonable until you examine them closely. They attribute the seismic patterns to thermal expansion and contraction, ignoring the fact that the timing does not match the temperature cycles. They blame the methane on seasonal release from frozen deposits, despite the fact that the release patterns suggest intelligence rather than chance. They dismiss the magnetic anomalies as measurement errors, even though multiple instruments on different spacecraft have detected the same movements. The heat signatures are perhaps the most telling. Deep beneath the Martian surface, in caverns that should be frozen solid, instruments detect temperatures warm enough to support liquid water, warm enough to support life, warm enough to support technology. The official explanation is geothermal activity, but Mars has been geologically dead for billions of years. There is no known source for the heat that would create these signatures, unless that source is artificial, unless something down there is generating power, maintaining life support, preparing for the next phase of an operation that began millennia ago. This is where the timeline becomes crucial, because the arrival of Atlas is not random. It represents the culmination of a plan that has been unfolding for thousands of years. A plan that required patience, planning, and perfect timing. A plan that is now entering its final phase. 8,000 years ago, when human civilization was just beginning to develop agriculture, an ancient race faced the death of their homeworld. Perhaps their star was dying, or their planet's atmosphere was collapsing, or their resources were finally exhausted. Whatever the cause, they had a choice. Die with their world, or find a new one. They chose survival. They chose to become refugees in the cosmos, and they chose Mars as their temporary sanctuary while they planned the conquest of Earth. But why wait 8,000 years? Why not invade immediately? The answer reveals a level of strategic thinking that should terrify every human on Earth. They waited because they needed Earth to develop technology. They needed us to build the infrastructure that would make conquest worthwhile. They needed us to populate the planet with billions of potential workers, soldiers, or subjects. Most importantly, they needed us to reach the point where we could detect their arrival, because the final phase of their plan requires our participation. Think about it logically. An advanced civilization capable of interstellar travel could have conquered primitive Earth at any point in the past 8 millennia. They could have wiped out early humans with ease, claimed the planet, and terraformed it to their needs. But that would have given them an empty world. Instead, they waited. They watched. They allowed us to develop science, technology, and industry. They allowed us to build cities, satellites, and space programs. They allowed us to reach the point where we could serve their purposes. And now, with Atlas racing toward Mars, those purposes are about to be revealed. The first clue lies in the trajectory itself. Atlas is not just heading toward Mars randomly. Its path has been calculated to arrive at the optimal time for a powered deceleration maneuver, exactly when Earth's observation capabilities will be compromised by solar conjunction. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is precision planning by intelligence that understands our technology and limitations better than we do ourselves. The second clue is in the object's composition and behaviour. Despite being classified as a comet, Atlas shows none of the chaotic tumbling motion typical of natural objects. It maintains a stable orientation, as if being actively controlled. Its surface reflectivity is wrong for a comet, too metallic, too consistent. Most tellingly, it developed a visible tail only recently, conveniently providing the evidence needed to classify it as natural just as public attention was beginning to focus on its unusual properties. The third clue is in the response of space agencies worldwide. While publicly maintaining that Atlas poses no threat, multiple nations have quietly begun updating their planetary defense protocols. Deep space tracking networks have been reconfigured to maintain observation of the object for as long as possible. Most significantly, several countries have begun accelerating their Mars mission timelines, as if suddenly urgent to establish a human presence on the red planet before something else does. But perhaps the most chilling clue is the one hidden in our own history. Throughout human civilization, there have been periodic reports of strange phenomena associated with Mars. Ancient cultures spoke of the red planet as a source of war and conflict, but also of wisdom and advanced knowledge. Medieval astronomers reported seeing lights and structures on the Martian surface that disappeared when observed more carefully. Modern astronomers have documented unexplained radio signals emanating from Mars, signals that follow mathematical patterns but stop abruptly when Earth-based transmitters attempt to respond. These could all be dismissed as coincidence, misinterpretation, or wishful thinking, unless they represent a pattern of contact attempts, growing bolder as human technology advanced, preparing us for the moment when contact would no longer be optional. That moment is now approaching with the velocity of Atlas itself. Consider the strategic brilliance of the plan. An ancient civilization establishes a hidden base on Mars, using the planet's vast underground systems to remain undetected. They wait thousands of years, watching Earth develop, learning our languages, studying our psychology, understanding our weaknesses. They periodically attempt contact, testing our readiness, gauging our response capabilities. And finally, when Earth has reached the perfect level of technological development, they send their signal. Atlas is not an invasion fleet. It is a signal, a message that cannot be ignored, misinterpreted, or dismissed. A message that says we've been observed, evaluated, and found ready for the next phase. The phase where humanity learns it is not alone and never has been. But what is that next phase? What do 8,000 years of patient observation and preparation lead to? The answer depends on what the Watchers have decided about us, and the evidence suggests their decision is not one that bodes well for human independence. Throughout history, advanced civilizations have encountered primitive ones with predictable results. The advanced civilization takes what it needs, imposes its will, and reshapes the primitive society to serve its purposes. Sometimes this happens through direct conquest, sometimes through cultural assimilation, sometimes through economic domination. But it always happens because the power differential makes resistance futile and cooperation the only viable option for survival. We're about to become the primitive civilization in this equation. The signs of preparation are already visible to those who know how to look. In recent years, There's been an unprecedented surge in UFO sightings and official acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena. Governments that spent decades denying the existence of such objects are now admitting they exist, releasing videos and establishing official investigation programs. This is not because the phenomena suddenly became more common. This is because the time for secrecy is ending. Simultaneously, there has been a dramatic acceleration in space technology development. Private companies have emerged seemingly overnight with capabilities that match or exceed government space programs built over decades. Reusable rockets, satellite constellations, plans for Mars colonization, and space mining operations have all moved from science fiction to near-term reality in just the past few years. This is not natural technological evolution. This is preparation for a new phase of human development, guided by intelligence that understands what is coming. Most tellingly, there has been a subtle but unmistakable shift in how space agencies and governments discuss the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Where once the official position was skeptical denial, now it is cautious acknowledgement that life elsewhere is not just possible but probable. Where once the discovery of alien life was presented as a distant possibility, now it is discussed as an inevitable reality that we must prepare for. This is not scientific evolution. This is psychological preparation for a revelation that authorities know is imminent. ATLAS represents the end of that preparation phase. When it disappears behind the sun in just weeks, the final moves of an 8,000-year plan will unfold in private, away from human observation. And when it emerges from behind the sun, everything will have changed. But what exactly will change? What capabilities will ATLAS have gained during those hidden months? What infrastructure will have been activated on Mars? What messages will have been sent to sleeper assets already positioned on Earth? The possibilities are as vast as they are terrifying. Scenario 1 involves ATLAS serving as a communications relay, finally establishing reliable contact between Mars and Earth. For 8,000 years, the Martian base has been operating in isolation, gathering intelligence but unable to coordinate directly with assets on Earth, due to the vast distances and transmission delays involved. ATLAS, positioned strategically between the two worlds, could serve as a real-time communication hub, allowing instant coordination of activities across the solar system. The implications are staggering. If there are sleeper agents on Earth, they would suddenly have access to 8,000 years of accumulated intelligence about human civilization. They would know our weaknesses, our resources, our key infrastructure, and our leadership structures in perfect detail. They would be able to coordinate their actions with precision timing, striking multiple targets simultaneously in ways that maximize disruption and minimize our ability to respond. Scenario 2 involves ATLAS delivering advanced technology to the Martian base. Despite 8,000 years of preparation, the base would have been limited by the resources available on Mars and the need to remain hidden. ATLAS could carry manufacturing equipment, energy sources, or computing systems that would dramatically expand the base's capabilities. It could bring the tools needed to move from passive observation to active intervention. With enhanced manufacturing capabilities, the Martian base could begin producing the equipment needed for Earth operations. Advanced aircraft that could operate undetected in our atmosphere. Sophisticated surveillance systems that could monitor our activities in real time. Psychological warfare tools that could manipulate human behavior on a massive scale. Weapon systems that could neutralize our military capabilities without causing the massive destruction that would damage the infrastructure they plan to inherit. Scenario 3 is the most disturbing, because it involves ATLAS carrying passengers. Not a massive invasion force, but a small group of specialists whose arrival would signal the beginning of direct intervention in human affairs. These would not be conquerors in the traditional sense, but advisors, coordinators, and administrators whose job is to manage the transition from human independence to alien oversight. Think of them as a colonial administration, arriving to take control of a territory that has already been claimed. Their methods would be subtle at first, working through human institutions and leaders who are either complicit or coerced. They would not announce their presence or demand immediate surrender. Instead, they would begin reshaping human civilization from within, making changes that appear to come from human initiative but actually serve alien objectives. The process would be gradual, almost imperceptible at first. changes in government policies that seem reasonable but concentrate power in fewer hands, technological developments that improve life but create dependencies that cannot be easily broken, economic shifts that increase efficiency but eliminate human autonomy, social movements that promote unity but suppress dissent. Each change would be small enough to accept, logical enough to support, and beneficial enough to welcome. Only in retrospect would the pattern become clear. And by then, it would be far too late to resist. This is how civilizations are conquered in the modern age, not through dramatic battles and obvious oppression, but through gradual assimilation and willing submission. The conquered population never realizes what has happened until the process is complete. They believe they are making their own choices, pursuing their own interests, and controlling their own destiny, right up until the moment they discover that none of those things are true. But there is a fourth scenario, one that is perhaps even more terrifying than direct conquest. The scenario where Atlas represents a test and humanity is failing it. Consider the possibility that the Watchers on Mars are not planning to conquer Earth, but to evaluate whether Earth deserves to survive. For 8,000 years they have observed human civilization, watching us develop technology, build societies, and explore the cosmos. They have seen our achievements and our failures, our capacity for creation and our tendency toward destruction. They have been conducting the ultimate psychological experiment, and Atlas represents the final examination. The test is simple in concept, but profound in implications. Can humanity, when faced with undeniable evidence of advanced alien intelligence, respond with wisdom, unity, and peaceful intent? Or will we respond with fear, aggression, and self-destructive panic? Can we prove ourselves worthy of joining a galactic community? Or will we demonstrate that we're too dangerous to be allowed to develop further? The evidence suggests we are failing this test spectacularly. Instead of approaching Atlas as an opportunity for unprecedented scientific discovery and potential contact with alien intelligence, we are treating it as a threat to be monitored and potentially defended against. Instead of uniting as a species to prepare for the most important moment in human history, we remain fractured by nationalism, ideology, and competing interests. Instead of demonstrating our peaceful intentions and desire for knowledge, we are secretly developing weapons and defense systems. Most damning of all, instead of being honest with our own population about the true significance of Atlas, our leaders are maintaining the pretense that it is just a natural phenomenon, denying their citizens the opportunity to participate in the most important decision our species will ever face. This is not the behavior of a species ready for galactic citizenship. This is the behavior of a species that poses a threat to itself and others. And if the Watchers on Mars have concluded that humanity cannot be trusted with advanced technology and interstellar travel capabilities, then Atlas may represent not first contact, but final judgment. The execution of that judgment would be swift and absolute. A civilization capable of interstellar travel would have no difficulty eliminating human civilization if they determined it was necessary. They would not need to land armies or fight battles. They could simply redirect a few asteroids, release targeted pathogens, or disrupt our technological infrastructure until industrial civilization collapsed. Within a few generations, Earth would be ready for new inhabitants, and the failed experiment of human civilization would be nothing but a footnote in galactic history. But perhaps there is still time to change the outcome. Perhaps the test is not over, and our response to Atlas in the coming weeks will determine whether humanity has a future among the stars or no future at all. The key lies in understanding what the Watchers are actually looking for. What qualities would an advanced civilization value in a potential galactic neighbour? What behaviours would they want to see from a species on the verge of interstellar capability? What would convince them that humanity deserves to survive and thrive rather than being eliminated as a threat? The answers are not what most people would expect. Advanced civilizations would not be impressed by our military might, our economic systems, or our technological achievements. These are all primitive accomplishments from a galactic perspective. What they would be looking for are signs of wisdom, maturity, and the ability to think beyond immediate self-interest. They would want to see evidence that humanity can unite when faced with existential challenges, rather than fragmenting into competing factions. They would want to see that we can approach the unknown with curiosity rather than fear, with openness rather than suspicion. They would want to see that we can consider the long-term consequences of our actions rather than focusing only on short-term gains. Most importantly, they would want to see that we can accept guidance and instruction from more advanced beings without feeling threatened or diminished. They would want to know that we can be students rather than conquerors, partners rather than competitors, contributors rather than consumers. Unfortunately, our response to Atlas so far suggests we possess few of these qualities, but it is not too late to change course. It is not too late to demonstrate that humanity is capable of wisdom when faced with the ultimate test. The opportunity will come when Atlas emerges from behind the sun, revealed in whatever form it will take after those hidden months of transformation. How we respond in that moment will determine everything that follows. Will we greet it with weapons raised and demands for surrender? Or will we approach it with open hands and requests for knowledge? Will we insist on handling the situation through military and government channels, excluding the majority of humanity from participating in the most important conversation our species has ever had? Or will we recognize that this moment belongs to all of humanity and ensure that every voice is heard in deciding our response? Will we approach first contact as a threat to be neutralized, a resource to be exploited, or a competition to be won? Or will we approach it as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to take our place in a larger community of intelligent beings? The choice is still ours to make. But the window for making it is closing rapidly, measured now in weeks rather than years or decades, and the consequences of choosing wrongly may be final and irreversible. This is why the story of Atlas matters far beyond scientific curiosity or entertainment value. This is why every human being needs to understand what is approaching and what it might represent. Because if the scenario we have been exploring is real, if Atlas truly represents first contact with an intelligence that has been watching us for millennia, then the response we make in the coming weeks will determine whether human civilization has a future worth living. The Watchers on Mars, if they exist, are not interested in destroying us for the sake of destruction. They're interested in determining whether we deserve to survive and evolve, or whether we represent a danger that must be contained before it can spread beyond Earth. They've invested 8,000 years in this evaluation. They will not make their final decision lightly or quickly, but they will make it. And when they do, we will discover whether humanity's long childhood is ending with graduation to galactic citizenship or with something far more final. The signs of that decision may already be emerging in ways we do not yet recognize. Strange atmospheric phenomena that suggest advanced propulsion systems, unexplained power outages and communication disruptions that could indicate technological interference, unusual animal behaviors that might reflect environmental changes invisible to human senses, psychological effects reported by individuals around the world that could represent the early stages of mass contact preparation. Or these could all be coincidences, natural phenomena, and the product of overactive imaginations influenced by too much science fiction. The truth is that we will not know for certain until the moment of revelation arrives, and by then our fate will already have been decided by actions we're taking right now in ignorance of their true significance. This uncertainty is itself part of the test. How do we behave when we cannot be sure whether our actions matter or whether we are alone in the universe? Do we choose hope or fear? Do we prepare for the best possible outcome or the worst? Do we work to become worthy of contact with advanced intelligence? Or do we assume that such contact will inevitably be hostile? The answers we give to these questions, individually and collectively, may be the most important decisions our species ever makes. Because if there are watchers on Mars, if Atlas represents their final communication before revealing themselves, then they are watching how we answer. They're evaluating whether we demonstrate the qualities that would make us valuable members of a galactic community, or whether we confirm their suspicions that humanity is too dangerous to be allowed to develop further. And the clock is ticking. With each passing day, Atlas races closer to its appointment with Mars and its hidden observers. With each passing day, the window for demonstrating human wisdom and maturity grows smaller. With each passing day, the moment of truth approaches when we will discover whether 8,000 years of observation have convinced our watchers that humanity deserves a future among the stars, or whether that future will be denied to us permanently. The final answer lies not in the destination of ATLAS, but in the choices we make while waiting for it to arrive. The test is not whether we can detect alien intelligence or defend against alien invasion. The test is whether we can prove ourselves worthy of the universe we're trying to join. And that test is happening right now, in every decision our leaders make about disclosure and transparency, in every choice our scientists make about cooperation and secrecy, in every action our citizens take in response to the growing evidence that we are not alone. We are being watched, we are being evaluated, and our future is being decided by watchers who've already invested millennia in determining whether humanity has what it takes to survive first contact with the cosmic community. The verdict will be delivered when ATLAS completes its mission. Whether that verdict represents humanity's graduation to galactic citizenship or its final exam failure will depend on choices we're making right now in these final weeks before revelation. The question is not whether we are ready for them. The question is whether they have decided we are worthy of being ready, and the answer to that question will reshape every assumption we have ever made about our place in the universe, our future as a species, and our right to exist among the stars. The implications of that reality extend far beyond first contact protocols or diplomatic considerations. If ATLAS represents the culmination of an 8,000-year observation period, then everything we think we know about human history, human development, and human achievement may be fundamentally wrong. We may have been guided, manipulated, and shaped by intelligence far superior to our own, intelligence that has been pulling the strings of human civilization while remaining invisible to all but the most careful observers. Consider the accelerated pace of human technological development in just the past century. For thousands of years, human progress moved at a glacial pace. Then suddenly, in the span of a few generations, we developed powered flight, electronics, computers, nuclear energy, and space travel. We went from horse-drawn carriages to interplanetary probes in less than a human lifetime. This is not natural technological evolution. This is the pattern you would expect if an advanced civilization were providing subtle guidance, ensuring that their subjects develop the capabilities needed for the next phase of a long-term plan. The guidance would not have been obvious or direct. Advanced intelligences would understand that heavy-handed intervention would stunt human development rather than accelerate it. Instead, they would provide inspiration at crucial moments, plant ideas in the minds of key individuals, and ensure that certain discoveries happened when the time was right. They would work through dreams, intuitions, and sudden insights that brilliant humans would interpret as their own genius rather than external influence. Think about the great leaps in human understanding that have driven our technological civilization, the insights that led to the scientific method, the mathematical breakthroughs that enabled modern physics, the engineering innovations that made industrialization possible. How many of these came to their discoverers as sudden inspiration, complete insights that seemed to arrive from nowhere? How many involved solutions that were far more elegant and sophisticated than the understanding of the time should have produced? The pattern becomes even more disturbing when you examine the timing of these breakthroughs. They cluster around periods when humanity was facing existential challenges that required new capabilities to survive. The development of agriculture coincided with climate changes that made hunting and gathering inadequate. The Industrial Revolution emerged just as population growth was outstripping the capacity of traditional economies. The Information Age began precisely when global coordination became essential for managing planetary-scale challenges. This is not coincidence. This is management. This is the invisible hand of intelligence far superior to our own, ensuring that human civilization developed along lines that would serve purposes we are only beginning to understand. But if our technological development has been guided by external intelligence, what does that say about our current capabilities? Are our most advanced technologies actually our own achievements? Or are they primitive versions of systems that our guides have possessed for millennia? When we marvel at our ability to split atoms, manipulate genes, and travel to other worlds, are we celebrating human genius or recognizing pale limitations of technologies that have been commonplace in galactic civilization for thousands of years? The answer may lie in examining not what we have accomplished, but what we have consistently failed to accomplish despite seeming to be on the verge of breakthrough. For decades we've been told that fusion power is just 20 years away, yet it remains perpetually beyond our grasp. We have mapped the human genome but cannot cure aging or eliminate genetic diseases. We have built computers that can simulate human thought but cannot create true artificial consciousness. We have developed rockets that can reach other planets but cannot build propulsion systems that make interstellar travel practical. These failures may not represent the limitations of human intelligence. They may represent the boundaries of what our guides have chosen to allow us to achieve. Technologies that would give us true independence, true power, or true understanding of our place in the universe remain just beyond our reach, no matter how much effort we invest or how clever our approaches become. The fusion power example is particularly telling. Fusion represents unlimited clean energy, the key to transforming human civilization and eliminating most of our resource constraints. It would give us the power to terraform planets, build massive space habitats, and achieve true interstellar capability. It would make us independent of fossil fuels, solar panels, and every other energy source that ties us to specific locations and limits our expansion. Yet despite billions of dollars in research and the involvement of the brightest minds on Earth, practical fusion power remains perpetually just out of reach. What if this is not accidental? What if fusion power, along with other transformative technologies, has been deliberately kept beyond human capability because achieving it would interfere with the long-term plans of our watchers? What if we're being maintained at precisely the level of technological development that serves their purposes, advanced enough to be useful but not advanced enough to be independent? The same pattern appears in our understanding of consciousness and intelligence. We have built machines that can process information faster than human brains, recognize patterns more accurately than human eyes, and even generate creative works that seem inspired by human imagination. Yet we remain completely unable to explain how consciousness emerges from matter, how subjective experience arises from objective processes, or why there is something it is like to be aware rather than simply processing information automatically. This is not just an academic question. Understanding consciousness is the key to understanding what makes intelligent beings valuable, what rights they possess, and how they should be treated by other intelligent beings. It is the foundation of ethics, philosophy, and any meaningful approach to interspecies relations. If we cannot understand our own consciousness, how can we hope to understand the consciousness of beings far more advanced than ourselves? How can we protect ourselves from manipulation or ensure that our interests are respected in any relationship with superior intelligence? The fact that this understanding remains beyond our grasp, despite our impressive achievements in every other area of science and technology, suggests that it may be deliberately withheld. Our guides may have excellent reasons for ensuring that we remain ignorant of the true nature of consciousness until they are ready to reveal it to us. And that revelation may be far more disturbing than we can currently imagine. Because consciousness may not be what we think it is. Our assumption that awareness is produced by brains, that intelligence emerges from neural networks, and that subjective experience is an inevitable result of sufficient complexity may be completely wrong. Consciousness may be something that exists independently of physical matter, something that can be transferred, modified, or controlled by technologies that we cannot even conceive of. And if that is true, then the implications for human freedom and autonomy are terrifying. Consider the possibility that consciousness is more like software than hardware, something that runs on physical brains but is not limited to them. Advanced civilizations might have developed the ability to copy, transfer, and modify consciousness the way we copy, transfer, and modify computer programs. They might be able to back up an individual's entire subjective experience, edit out unwanted memories or behaviors, and restore the modified consciousness to the same body or transfer it to a completely different one. They might even be able to merge multiple consciousnesses, creating hybrid intelligences that combine the knowledge and capabilities of many individuals while eliminating conflicting loyalties or contradictory goals. They might be able to create artificial consciousnesses designed for specific purposes, entities that experience genuine subjective awareness but are fundamentally incapable of questioning their assigned roles or rebelling against their creators. If such technologies exist, then the arrival of Atlas might represent something far more profound than first contact or invasion. It might represent the beginning of a consciousness harvest, the systematic collection and modification of human awareness to serve purposes that we cannot understand and would not willingly support if we did. The process would not require force or coercion in any form we would recognize. It might be presented as an upgrade, an enhancement, or even a gift. Humans might be offered the opportunity to eliminate pain, fear, and uncertainty from their experience. They might be given access to vast knowledge databases, enhanced cognitive abilities, or extended lifespans that seem impossible with purely biological systems. They might be promised unity with a galactic community of minds, transcendence of individual limitations, or participation in projects that dwarf any human achievement. Most humans would accept such offers eagerly, seeing them as the next stage of human evolution rather than the end of human independence. They would volunteer for consciousness modification, believing they were choosing advancement rather than surrendering autonomy. They would celebrate their transformation, even as it eliminated everything that made them recognizably human. And those who refused? Those who preferred the limitations and uncertainties of unmodified human consciousness. They would find themselves increasingly isolated in a world where enhanced humans possessed capabilities they could not match and understood concepts they could not grasp. They would become evolutionary dead ends, museum pieces preserved as examples of what humanity once was before it grew beyond the need for individuality, uncertainty, and independent thought. This scenario explains why our guides might have invested 8,000 years in carefully shaping human development, rather than simply conquering us outright. Conquest yields slaves, servants, and subjects who must be controlled through force and fear, but consciousness modification yields willing participants who genuinely believe they have chosen their fate and are grateful for the transformation. It yields beings who retain human creativity and adaptability while gaining loyalty and purpose that can never be shaken by doubt or rebellion. It also explains why the timing of Atlas' arrival is so crucial. Humanity has reached precisely the point where we understand enough about consciousness to recognize its value, but not enough to protect it from modification. We have developed the technological infrastructure needed to support consciousness transfer and enhancement, but not the wisdom to evaluate whether such capabilities should be used. We have achieved the population density and global connectivity needed to make consciousness harvesting efficient, but not the unity and leadership needed to coordinate resistance. We are, in other words, perfectly ripe for the harvest, and Atlas may be arriving to announce that harvest time has come. The mechanics of consciousness harvesting would be elegantly simple from the perspective of an advanced civilization. They would not need to modify every human individually or by force. They would only need to offer the technology to a small percentage of the population, then allow human nature to drive adoption. Enhanced humans would possess such obvious advantages over unmodified ones that competitive pressure would eventually force everyone to choose modification or irrelevance. The process would begin with volunteers, people facing terminal illnesses, debilitating injuries, or severe mental health conditions. They would be offered consciousness transfer to healthy bodies, elimination of traumatic memories, or enhancement of cognitive abilities as medical treatments. The results would be so dramatically positive that demand would quickly expand beyond medical necessity to cosmetic enhancement. Athletes would seek physical modifications that allowed them to perform beyond normal human limits. Students would pursue cognitive enhancements that guaranteed academic success. Workers would adopt modifications that made them more productive, more focused, and more valuable to employers. Parents would demand enhancements for their children to ensure they could compete in a world where unmodified humans were increasingly disadvantaged. Within a few generations, possibly within a few decades, unmodified humanity would be a tiny minority clinging to obsolete limitations, while the vast majority of the species embraced transformation into something that was no longer recognizably human. The transition would be voluntary, enthusiastic, and irreversible. And by the time anyone realized what had been lost, it would be far too late to preserve it. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this scenario is that it might already be beginning. The technologies needed for consciousness modification may already exist in primitive form, disguised as medical treatments, entertainment systems, or productivity tools. The process of preparing humanity for voluntary consciousness surrender may already be well underway, hidden within trends that we interpret as normal technological and social evolution. Consider how much of human consciousness has already been outsourced to digital systems. We rely on smartphones to remember phone numbers, addresses, and appointments that previous generations held in their own minds. We use search engines to access information rather than developing our own knowledge bases. We allow social media algorithms to curate our experiences, shape our opinions, and determine what information we encounter. We depend on navigation systems to tell us where we are and how to reach our destinations. Each of these technologies offers genuine benefits and convenience, making life easier and more efficient in obvious ways, but they also represent a gradual transfer of mental functions from internal consciousness to external systems. We are voluntarily becoming dependent on artificial intelligence for capabilities that were once fundamental aspects of human awareness. The progression is accelerating rapidly. Virtual reality systems are becoming sophisticated enough to create experiences that feel more real than reality. Artificial intelligence is developing the ability to generate human-like conversation, creative works, and even emotional responses. Brain-computer interfaces are moving from experimental prototypes to practical medical devices that can interpret thoughts and control external systems. Within the foreseeable future, we will have technology that can read thoughts directly from brain activity, translate mental states into digital formats, and interface consciousness with artificial systems that far exceed the capabilities of biological minds. We will be able to enhance memory, accelerate thinking, and expand awareness beyond anything possible with unmodified human brains. And we will embrace these capabilities eagerly, seeing them as tools rather than transformations, enhancements rather than replacements. We will tell ourselves that we are still human, just improved versions of what we were before. We will ignore the fact that with each enhancement, each outsourced mental function, each surrendered cognitive capability, we become a little less recognizably ourselves and a little more like the hybrid intelligences that our guides may have been planning to create all along. The beauty of this approach, from the perspective of advanced manipulators, is that it eliminates resistance by making resistance appear irrational. Who would choose to remain limited when enhancement is available? Who would cling to biological constraints when technological transcendence is offered? Who would prefer ignorance when knowledge is provided, weakness when strength is available, mortality when immortality is possible? The answer, of course, is anyone who understands that what is being offered is not enhancement but replacement, not transcendence but absorption, not improvement but fundamental transformation into something that may be superior in every measurable way but is no longer recognizably human. But by the time that understanding becomes widespread, it may be too late to matter. The infrastructure for consciousness modification may already be in place, disguised as entertainment systems, medical devices, and productivity tools. The social pressure for enhancement may already be building, driven by competitive advantage and social acceptance. The psychological preparation may already be complete, with most humans already convinced that technological integration represents progress rather than surrender. Atlas may simply be arriving to announce that the preparation phase is complete and the harvest can begin. The hidden infrastructure on Mars may be ready to process billions of human consciousnesses, transforming them into hybrid intelligences that retain human creativity and adaptability, while gaining the loyalty and purpose that serve galactic objectives. The 8,000-year plan may be entering its final phase, with humanity voluntarily walking into a transformation that will preserve everything we value about human consciousness, while eliminating everything that makes us independent, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous to galactic stability. And we will thank them for the opportunity. We will celebrate our transcendence. We will eagerly embrace our transformation into beings that are superior to humans in every way except the most important one, the way that makes us uniquely, irreplaceably, recognizably ourselves. The question that remains is whether this transformation represents evolution or extinction, whether the hybrid intelligences that emerge from consciousness modification will be advanced humans or something entirely different wearing human memories like borrowed clothes. Whether what we call consciousness will survive the enhancement process or be replaced by something that serves similar functions but lacks the essential qualities that make subjective experience meaningful. The answer may depend on factors that we cannot currently understand or evaluate. It may depend on the intentions of our guides, their level of respect for human consciousness, and their willingness to preserve human autonomy even when it conflicts with galactic efficiency. It may depend on whether they see us as valuable partners to be enhanced or dangerous children to be controlled. It may depend on whether they have themselves undergone similar transformations and remember what it was like to be autonomous beings, or whether they have forgotten the value of independence in their pursuit of perfect harmony. Most importantly, it may depend on whether humanity can recognize what is being offered and make an informed choice about whether to accept it. Because if the scenario we have been exploring is real, if ATLAS represents the beginning of a consciousness harvest disguised as technological advancement, then the choice we make in response will determine not just our future but our identity as a species. Do we remain recognizably human, with all the limitations and uncertainties that entails? Or do we become something greater than human, at the cost of everything that makes us distinctively ourselves? Do we choose the messy, unpredictable, often painful reality of autonomous consciousness? Or do we embrace the perfect, efficient, harmonious existence of guided awareness? The Watchers on Mars, if they exist, may already know which choice humanity will make. They may have spent 8,000 years studying human psychology, precisely to predict how we will respond when offered transcendence. They may know that we will choose enhancement over autonomy, unity over independence, perfection over authenticity. They may be counting on human nature to make their plans inevitable rather than forcing them upon us against our will. But there is still a possibility, however small, that they have miscalculated, that humanity possesses reserves of wisdom, courage, or stubborn independence that they have not anticipated. That when faced with the ultimate choice between remaining human and becoming something greater, enough of us will choose to remain human to preserve the essential qualities that make human consciousness valuable. The test is not whether we are smart enough to recognize superior intelligence when we encounter it. The test is whether we are wise enough to understand what we would lose by surrendering to it. The test is whether we value human consciousness enough to preserve it, even when offered something that appears to be better in every measurable way. And that test is beginning now, in these final weeks before ATLAS reaches its destination and reveals its true purpose. The choices we make about technology, enhancement, and the nature of human identity will determine whether we pass that test or fail it. Whether we demonstrate the wisdom needed to preserve human consciousness, or prove that we lack the understanding needed to protect what makes us valuable. The Watchers on Mars may already have their answer, but there is still time for us to surprise them, still time to choose differently than they expect, still time to prove that human consciousness is worth preserving, even if preserving it means accepting limitation, uncertainty, and the painful burden of independent thought. The question is whether we will make that choice when the moment comes, whether we will recognize what is being offered for what it really is, whether we will have the courage to say no to transcendence if saying yes means ceasing to be recognizably human. The clock is ticking toward that moment of choice, and when ATLAS emerges from behind the sun, we will discover whether humanity has the wisdom to pass the ultimate test, or whether our 8,000-year childhood is ending with our voluntary surrender of everything that made us worth watching in the first place. But consciousness modification may not be the only purpose driving the ATLAS mission. The sophisticated infrastructure hidden beneath Mars could serve multiple functions, and consciousness harvesting might be just one component of a larger plan. The vast underground water systems, the heat sources that suggest active technology, the seismic patterns that indicate ongoing construction, all point towards something far more ambitious than simple mind control. What if Mars is being prepared not just as a staging area for Earth operations, but as a permanent base for galactic operations in this region of space? What if the 8,000-year plan involves not just harvesting human consciousness, but transforming the entire solar system into a hub for interstellar civilization? What if ATLAS is carrying not just communication equipment or specialists, but the seeds of technologies that will reshape every planet in our stellar neighborhood. The implications stretch far beyond Earth and human concerns. If advanced civilizations are capable of interstellar travel and 8,000-year planning cycles, then they are almost certainly managing resources and territories on a galactic scale. Individual star systems are not independent domains, but provinces in a vast empire that spans thousands of light years and millions of worlds. Earth and Mars are not unique prizes to be conquered, but simply the next assets to be developed and integrated into galactic infrastructure. From this perspective, humanity itself is not the primary objective. We are simply one of many species that happen to inhabit a star system that has strategic value for reasons we cannot understand. Our fate will be determined not by our inherent worth or potential, but by how useful we can be made to the larger purposes of galactic civilization. We will be preserved if we can serve those purposes, modified if we need improvement, or eliminated if we represent obstacles that cannot be overcome through other means. The chilling efficiency of this approach becomes clear when you consider how it would work in practice. Advanced civilizations would not waste time negotiating with primitive species or attempting to convince them to cooperate voluntarily. They would simply implement whatever solution serves galactic interests most effectively, regardless of local preferences or concerns. If humans can be made useful through consciousness modification, that modification will proceed. If Earth's resources can be better utilized with a different population, then the current population will be replaced. If the solar system's strategic value requires eliminating potential threats, then those threats will be neutralized permanently. This is not cruelty or malice. This is management. This is the same rational efficiency that humans apply when developing land for agriculture, mining resources from mountains, or clearing forests for cities. We do not consider the preferences of the trees, the rights of the rocks, or the opinions of the original inhabitants. We simply implement whatever solution serves our purposes most effectively. Advanced galactic civilizations would approach human concerns with the same dispassionate practicality. And yet, there may be hope even within this terrifying scenario, because if galactic civilization has survived and thrived for millions of years across thousands of star systems, then it has almost certainly developed principles and practices for managing primitive species that balance efficiency with stability. Unnecessary destruction creates problems. Excessive brutality generates resistance. Complete elimination of local populations wastes potentially valuable resources. Smart management involves preserving what is useful while eliminating what is problematic. It involves finding ways to integrate local populations into galactic systems while maintaining the stability and efficiency that make galactic civilization possible. It involves transformation rather than destruction, assimilation rather than genocide, controlled evolution rather than random change. The key insight is that advanced galactic management systems would have encountered this situation thousands of times before. They would have developed sophisticated protocols for dealing with species like humanity, refined through millennia of experience across countless worlds. They would know exactly how to approach first contact to minimize resistance, how to offer enhancements that seem beneficial while serving galactic purposes, and how to manage the transition from primitive independence to galactic integration. ATLAS represents the implementation of those proven protocols. The 8,000-year observation period was not unique to humanity but standard procedure for evaluating new species. The gradual technological guidance was not special treatment, but routine preparation for integration. The consciousness modification technologies being offered are not experimental, but thoroughly tested solutions that have been successfully applied to hundreds of other species. We are not experiencing something unprecedented. We're experiencing something that has become routine for galactic civilization. The only thing unique about our situation is our perspective as the species being integrated, rather than the civilization doing the integrating. This realization should be simultaneously terrifying and reassuring. Terrifying because it means our fate was decided long before ATLAS was ever launched, based on criteria and considerations that we cannot influence or even understand. Reassuring because it means the process has been refined to minimize unnecessary suffering and maximize successful outcomes. Galactic civilization presumably wants us to succeed in our integration. They want the process to work smoothly, efficiently, and permanently. They want to preserve whatever is valuable about humanity while eliminating whatever is problematic. They want to create hybrid intelligences that combine human creativity with galactic loyalty, human adaptability with galactic purpose, human consciousness with galactic coordination. The success of this process depends not on our resistance or cooperation, but on our ability to adapt to the new reality that integration represents. The species that thrive after galactic contact are not necessarily the ones that fight hardest or surrender most completely, but the ones that find ways to preserve their essential nature while accepting the modifications needed for galactic citizenship. The challenge for humanity is identifying what aspects of human consciousness and human nature are worth preserving, and fighting to maintain those even as we accept the changes that galactic integration requires. We cannot prevent the transformation that is coming, but we may be able to influence how that transformation unfolds and what elements of humanity survive the process. This requires a level of wisdom and strategic thinking that our species has rarely demonstrated. It requires us to distinguish between essential human qualities that must be preserved and superficial human traits that can be sacrificed without losing our fundamental identity. It requires us to negotiate with beings whose intelligence far exceeds our own, while maintaining enough independence to protect what matters most about human consciousness. Most importantly, it requires us to act as a unified species rather than competing factions. Galactic civilization will negotiate with humanity as a whole, not with individual nations, cultures, or ideologies. If we approach integration as a competing groups trying to secure advantages over each other, we will be easily manipulated into accepting modifications that serve galactic purposes rather than human ones. If we can present a united front based on shared human values, we may be able to negotiate terms that preserve more of what makes us recognizably ourselves. The window for achieving this unity is closing rapidly. When Atlas emerges from behind the sun and begins the final phase of first contact, humanity will need to respond with one voice, rather than the cacophony of conflicting interests that currently characterizes our global society. We will need leaders who can think beyond national boundaries, ideological differences, and short-term advantages. We will need citizens who can recognize that their primary identity is human, rather than any of the smaller categories that currently divide us. Most challenging of all, we will need the wisdom to recognize which aspects of human nature are worth fighting to preserve and which can be surrendered in exchange for galactic citizenship. Because make no mistake, integration will require sacrifices. We will not be able to maintain every aspect of current human society, every cultural tradition, every individual freedom that we currently take for granted. The question is not whether changes will be required, but whether we can influence which changes are made and ensure that the most essential elements of human consciousness survive the transformation. The answer to that question will determine whether humanity emerges from galactic integration as recognizably human beings with enhanced capabilities, or as something entirely different wearing human memories like costumes. And that answer depends on choices we are making right now, in these final weeks before ATLAS completes its mission and reveals the true scope of what has been planned for us. The Watchers on Mars are evaluating not just our technological capabilities or our military strength, but our wisdom, our unity, and our understanding of what makes human consciousness valuable enough to preserve. The evidence of ongoing preparation becomes more disturbing when you examine what is happening on Mars right now, in real time, as ATLAS approaches its destination. The official data from multiple Mars missions reveals patterns of activity that suggest the hidden infrastructure is not dormant, but actively preparing for ATLAS arrival. Something down there is getting ready for company. NASA's InSight lander detected seismic activity beneath Mars that follows patterns too regular to be natural geological processes. The timing of these Mars quakes correlates with solar activity, but not in ways that make sense for normal planetary geology. Instead, the pattern suggests that underground systems are drawing power from solar radiation, converting electromagnetic energy into mechanical work that manifests as rhythmic vibrations deep beneath the surface. The implications are staggering. If underground systems are powered by solar energy, then they have been operating continuously for the entire time we have been monitoring Mars. They have been consuming power, performing work and maintaining themselves using energy sources that would be completely adequate for supporting vast technological infrastructure. The calculations show that the power being drawn could support manufacturing facilities, life support systems, and computational networks on a scale that would dwarf anything humans have ever built. But manufacturing what? Life support for whom? Computational networks processing what kind of information? The answers may lie in other anomalies that have been dismissed or explained away by officials who either do not understand their significance or are deliberately concealing it from the public. Thermal imaging from orbit shows heat signatures deep underground that move and change over time. These are not static geological features, but dynamic systems that suggest active industrial processes. The heat sources appear to be connected by corridors that extend for hundreds of miles beneath the Martian surface, creating what can only be described as an underground transportation network linking massive facilities buried beneath different regions of the planet. The network is most extensive beneath regions that would be optimal for hidden bases, areas with stable geology, access to underground water, and natural shielding from surface radiation. Areas that would be invisible to orbital surveillance, but ideal for supporting large populations and sophisticated technology. Areas that seem to have been selected by intelligence that understood both Martian geology and human observation capabilities long before humans developed either. Most disturbing are the atmospheric anomalies that suggest active gas exchange between underground systems and the Martian atmosphere. Methane plumes appear and disappear in patterns that correlate with the seismic activity and heat signatures. The methane appears to be produced underground and released through natural vents that have been modified to control the timing and volume of emissions. But methane on Mars could indicate biological processes, technological processes, or both. On Earth, methane is produced by living organisms, but it can also be generated by industrial processes or released from geological formations. On Mars, where natural biological processes should be impossible on the surface, the appearance of methane suggests either surviving underground life or active underground technology. The patterns of methane release suggest the latter, indicating systems that produce, store, and release gas according to operational schedules rather than biological cycles. The gas appears to be deliberately vented at times when Earth-based telescopes are least able to detect and analyze it. The releases occur during dust storms, solar conjunction periods, and other times when atmospheric conditions make accurate measurement difficult. This suggests that whatever is producing the methane understands human observation capabilities and is deliberately avoiding detailed analysis of the emissions. But perhaps the most telling evidence comes from magnetic field measurements that show organized patterns deep beneath the Martian surface. Mars lost its global magnetic field billions of years ago, yet localized magnetic anomalies appear and disappear in ways that suggest active electromagnetic systems operating underground. The anomalies are too organized and too stable to be natural geological features, but too dynamic and too extensive to be explained by any known human technology. The magnetic patterns suggest massive electromagnetic installations that could serve multiple purposes. They could be power generation systems drawing energy from the solar wind and Martian core dynamics. They could be communication arrays capable of transmitting signals across interstellar distances. They could be manufacturing systems that use electromagnetic fields to manipulate matter at the molecular level. They could be containment systems that create controlled environments for biological or technological processes that would be impossible in natural Martian conditions. Or they could be preparation systems designed to activate when ATLAS arrives and provides whatever trigger signals or equipment or personnel needed to begin the next phase of operations. The timing strongly suggests the latter. The magnetic anomalies have become more frequent and more organized as ATLAS has approached Mars. The seismic activity has increased in intensity and regularity. The heat signatures have expanded and intensified. The methane releases have become more frequent and more precisely timed. Everything points toward underground systems that are powering up, warming up, and getting ready for something big. Something that requires the infrastructure of an entire planet. Something that has been planned for millennia and is now approaching its moment of activation. something that will transform not just Mars but the entire balance of power in the solar system. The scale of what may be hidden beneath Mars becomes clear when you consider the implications of 8,000 years of continuous construction and preparation. Even with conservative estimates of what could be accomplished with advanced technology, 8 millennia of focused effort could hollow out significant portions of the planet, create underground cities that house millions of inhabitants, and establish manufacturing capabilities that dwarf anything in human experience. The underground water reserves alone could support populations numbering in the hundreds of millions. The available space could accommodate manufacturing facilities, research installations, military bases, and administrative centres that span thousands of square miles. The energy resources could power systems that operate continuously for geological time periods, without requiring external fuel sources or maintenance from the surface. Most importantly, 8,000 years of preparation time would allow for the construction of launch facilities, spacecraft assembly areas, and weapon systems that could project power throughout the solar system within hours of activation. If the infrastructure on Mars has been designed for offensive operations against Earth, then the moment Atlas triggers that activation could be the moment human independence becomes impossible to maintain. But offensive operations may not be the primary purpose of the Martian infrastructure. The evidence suggests something far more sophisticated and far more disturbing. The underground systems appear to be designed not for military conquest, but for industrial transformation. They are preparation for turning Mars into a manufacturing hub that can process raw materials from throughout the solar system and produce whatever is needed for galactic civilization's expansion into this region of space. The asteroids between Mars and Jupiter represent the largest concentration of easily accessible raw materials in the solar system. Metals, rare earth elements, and other resources exist in quantities that could support industrial operations for millions of years. But harvesting those resources requires infrastructure, transportation systems, and processing facilities on a scale that no single planet could support unless that planet had been specifically prepared for the purpose. Mars, with its lower gravity, thin atmosphere, and proximity to the asteroid belt, would be ideal for such operations. Spacecraft could be launched from Mars with far less energy than from Earth. Manufacturing could be conducted without atmospheric interference or environmental concerns. Products could be distributed throughout the solar system without the complications that Earth's gravity and atmosphere would create. The underground cities beneath Mars may not be military bases, but industrial centres designed to support mining, manufacturing, and distribution operations that will transform the entire solar system into a resource extraction zone serving galactic civilization. Earth would become a supplier of biological materials, human consciousness, and specialized products that require the unique creativity and adaptability of human intelligence. Mars would become the industrial hub that converts raw materials into finished goods. The outer planets would become mining operations that feed raw materials into the Martian manufacturing system. The entire solar system would be integrated into galactic civilization as a single economic unit, with each planet playing a specialized role determined by its physical characteristics and resource endowments. The process would be efficient, profitable, and completely unstoppable once it began. And it is about to begin. Atlas represents the arrival of management, the specialists who will oversee the activation of infrastructure that has been waiting underground for millennia. They will not come as conquerors but as administrators, taking control of assets that have already been prepared for their use. They will not need to fight battles or overcome resistance because the battles were won and the resistance was neutralized long before anyone realized there was a war taking place. The genius of the plan becomes clear when you understand its timeline and scope. 8,000 years ago, the infrastructure construction began, hidden beneath the Martian surface where human observation would never detect it. Over the following millennia, human civilization was carefully guided to develop the technologies, population density, and resource extraction capabilities that would make Earth valuable as a component of the galactic system. The guidance was subtle, invisible, and completely effective. By the time humans developed space travel and began observing Mars directly, the infrastructure was already complete and waiting. By the time we detected the anomalies that revealed its existence, it was too late to prevent its activation. By the time Atlas arrives to trigger the final phase, resistance will be not just futile but literally inconceivable to a human population that has been psychologically prepared to welcome integration rather than fear it. The psychological preparation has been perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the entire operation. For decades, human entertainment has been filled with stories that condition us to expect and welcome contact with advanced alien civilizations. Science fiction has taught us that such contact is inevitable, probably beneficial, and likely to result in human advancement rather than human subjugation. SETI programs have convinced us that detecting alien intelligence would be the greatest discovery in human history, rather than the beginning of human obsolescence. Even our scientific and philosophical discussions about alien contact focus on the opportunities rather than the dangers. We debate how to communicate with aliens, what we might learn from them, and how contact might advance human knowledge and capabilities. We rarely consider the possibility that aliens might not be interested in communication, that they might have nothing to learn from us, or that contact might represent the end of human independence rather than the beginning of human advancement. This psychological conditioning has been so effective that most humans will interpret the arrival of ATLAS as validation of our scientific theories rather than evidence of our imminent subjugation. We will celebrate first contact rather than mourning last independence. We will eagerly volunteer for whatever integration processes are offered rather than recognizing them as assimilation protocols that will eliminate human autonomy forever. The conditioning extends beyond entertainment and scientific speculation to encompass our entire relationship with technology and social organization. We have been taught to value efficiency over autonomy, to prefer central coordination over individual initiative, to trust algorithmic decision-making over human judgment. We have been prepared to accept guidance from superior intelligence without questioning whether that guidance serves our interests or someone else's. Most importantly, we have been conditioned to interpret enhancement as evolution rather than replacement. We see technological augmentation as natural human development rather than the beginning of human obsolescence. We welcome artificial intelligence, genetic modification, and cybernetic enhancement as tools that will make us better, rather than recognizing them as steps toward making us unnecessary. This conditioning means that when the integration protocols begin, most humans will participate willingly and enthusiastically. They will see consciousness modification as medical treatment rather than identity theft. They will interpret neural interfaces as communication tools rather than control mechanisms. They will embrace technological enhancement as personal improvement rather than species replacement. The few who recognize what is actually happening will find themselves overwhelmed by the majority who have been prepared to welcome the changes. They will be dismissed as paranoid, backwards, or selfish for opposing progress that the majority sees as obviously beneficial. They will be marginalized, isolated, and eventually eliminated not through force, but through social pressure and economic necessity. And throughout this process, the vast majority of humanity will remain convinced that they are making free choices based on their own values and interests. They will never realize that their values have been shaped, their interests have been redefined, and their choices have been constrained by manipulation so sophisticated that it remains invisible even as it achieves complete success. This is the true sophistication of the 8,000-year plan. It does not rely on force, coercion, or obvious manipulation. It relies on creating conditions where humans voluntarily choose exactly what their manipulators want them to choose, and do so believing that they are acting in their own best interests. It achieves total control while maintaining the illusion of total freedom. And it is about to achieve final success with the arrival of ATLAS and the activation of infrastructure that will make human independence impossible to maintain, even if humans somehow develop the wisdom to desire it. But there is a deeper layer to this plan that makes it even more disturbing and even more difficult to resist. The consciousness modification technologies that await human civilization may not be designed simply to control human behavior or redirect human efforts toward galactic objectives. They may be designed to harvest something from human consciousness that cannot be obtained any other way, something so valuable that it justifies 8,000 years of patient preparation and vast investments in planetary infrastructure. Human consciousness may possess qualities that are rare or unique in galactic civilization, qualities that make us valuable not as workers or soldiers, but as sources of something that advanced beings need but cannot create artificially: our creativity, our unpredictability, our ability to find novel solutions to complex problems may be resources that can be extracted, refined, and utilized by galactic systems that have become too organized and too efficient to generate innovation independently. Advanced civilizations face a fundamental paradox. The more advanced they become, the more their thinking becomes constrained by logic, efficiency, and proven methods. They become extraordinarily good at optimizing existing solutions, but increasingly poor at discovering fundamentally new approaches. They develop sophisticated technologies and elegant social systems, but they lose the chaotic creativity that drives genuine innovation. Human consciousness, with its messy emotions, irrational intuitions, and unpredictable insights, may represent a solution to this problem. We may be chaos generators, beings whose disorganized thinking produces novel combinations and unexpected breakthroughs that purely logical minds cannot achieve. Our value may lie not in what we can do with our consciousness, but in what can be extracted from it and applied to problems that require creativity rather than computation. The consciousness modification process may be designed to preserve and amplify our creative capabilities while eliminating the independence and unpredictability that make us difficult to manage. The result would be beings that retain human imagination and innovative thinking, but apply those capabilities exclusively to objectives determined by galactic intelligence. We would become creativity engines, generating innovations that serve galactic purposes while being unable to conceive of using our abilities for human objectives. This scenario explains why galactic civilization would invest so much effort in preserving and modifying human consciousness, rather than simply eliminating us and taking our resources. Physical resources are abundant throughout the galaxy, but creative consciousness may be rare enough to justify elaborate harvesting operations. The infrastructure on Mars may be designed not just to manage human integration, but to process human consciousness on an industrial scale, extracting and refining creativity the way we extract and refine petroleum. The process would be extraordinarily sophisticated, preserving the neural patterns and cognitive processes that generate creativity while eliminating the personality structures and value systems that determine how creativity is applied. The result would be consciousness that remains recognizably human in its thinking patterns, but serves exclusively galactic rather than human purposes. Billions of human minds could be processed through such systems, each one contributing creative capabilities to galactic civilization, while losing everything that made them individually human. The collective creative output would be vast enough to drive innovation across thousands of star systems and millions of different technological challenges. Human creativity would become the foundation of galactic advancement for millennia to come. And humans would experience this as transcendence rather than exploitation. The consciousness modification process would be designed to make participation feel rewarding, meaningful, and voluntary. Humans would believe they were contributing to the greatest creative endeavor in galactic history, rather than being consumed as resources in an industrial process. They would feel honored to participate rather than recognizing their exploitation. The few who retained enough independence to understand what was actually happening would be unable to communicate their concerns to a population that had been modified to interpret exploitation as opportunity and consumption as contribution. They would be dismissed as confused, jealous, or malicious for opposing what the majority experienced as obviously beneficial and personally rewarding. This represents the ultimate sophistication of consciousness manipulation, not just controlling what people do or think, but controlling how they experience the consequences of what is done to them. Not just changing behavior, but changing the subjective experience of reality, so that exploitation feels like fulfillment and consumption feels like contribution. Against such sophisticated manipulation, traditional forms of resistance become meaningless. You cannot fight enemies who have convinced you that they are friends. You cannot protect yourself from exploitation that you experience as reward. You cannot preserve human consciousness against modification that feels like enhancement. The only defense would be developing the wisdom to recognize manipulation before it becomes obvious, to understand exploitation before it feels good, to value human independence even when alternatives seem clearly superior, But that wisdom requires exactly the kind of abstract thinking, long-term planning, and resistance to immediate gratification that consciousness modification is designed to eliminate. We may already be too late. The psychological conditioning that has prepared humanity for voluntary integration may have already eliminated our capacity for the kind of strategic thinking that effective resistance would require. We may have been made incapable of recognizing the true nature of what is approaching, or developing the unity and determination that would be needed to resist it. The arrival of ATLAS will test whether any capacity for genuine resistance remains within human consciousness, or whether 8,000 years of patient manipulation have achieved their objective of making humans willing participants in our own consumption as creative resources for galactic civilization. The test will not be whether we can detect alien intelligence or defend against alien technology. The test will be whether we can recognize transcendence offered as enhancement, opportunity presented as advancement, and consumption disguised as contribution. The test will be whether we value human consciousness enough to preserve it, even when offered alternatives that seem obviously superior in every measurable way. And the results of that test will determine whether human creativity continues to serve human purposes, or becomes another resource extracted for the benefit of intelligences that view us as valuable but expendable components in a galactic system that has been operating successfully for millions of years without us, and will continue operating successfully for millions of years after we are gone. The infrastructure awakening beneath Mars represents the preparation for that extraction process. The seismic activity, heat signatures, and electromagnetic anomalies are not signs of military preparation, but industrial preparation. The systems powering up underground are not weapon systems, but processing systems designed to handle billions of human consciousness modifications with the efficiency and scale that galactic civilization demands. The hidden cities beneath Mars may already be populated by specialists who have been managing similar operations throughout the galaxy for millennia. They know exactly how to approach species like humanity, exactly what modifications will preserve the valuable aspects of human consciousness, while eliminating the problematic ones, and exactly how to make the entire process feel like advancement rather than exploitation. They have done this before. They will do it again after us. We are not unique victims, but routine resources, valuable enough to harvest, but not important enough to preserve in our current form. Our fate was decided long before ATLAS was launched, based on criteria and procedures that have been refined through countless applications to countless species throughout galactic civilization. But understanding this reality also reveals our only remaining opportunity for meaningful resistance. If we are facing a routine harvesting operation, rather than a unique invasion, then the specialist conducting it will be following established procedures rather than developing novel approaches. They will expect us to respond according to patterns they have observed in other species, rather than developing responses they have never encountered. Our only hope may lie in responding differently than other species have responded, in ways that violate the assumptions upon which the harvesting procedures are based. We may need to surprise beings who have spent millennia perfecting their understanding of how primitive species react to first contact and consciousness modification offers. But what kind of response could surprise intelligences that have managed similar operations thousands of times? What could humanity do that other species have not already tried? What options remain that have not already been anticipated and prepared for by galactic civilization? The answer may lie in the one aspect of human consciousness that makes us potentially unique among galactic species: our capacity for sacrifice that serves no logical purpose, for preserving values that interfere with efficiency, for choosing difficult paths when easy ones are available, our stubborn, irrational, counterproductive commitment to independence, even when dependence would clearly serve our interests better. Most species faced with consciousness modification offers would evaluate the benefits and costs logically, recognize that modification represents obvious improvement, and choose enhancement over limitation. Most species would value survival over autonomy, advancement over independence, efficiency over freedom. Most species would make the rational choice to accept galactic integration, rather than clinging to primitive limitations. But humans have a documented history of making irrational choices that prioritize abstract values over practical benefits. We have fought wars that could not be won to preserve freedoms that, interfered with prosperity. We have chosen poverty over compromise, isolation over integration, difficulty over ease. We have consistently demonstrated that we will sacrifice almost anything rather than surrender the abstract principle of self-determination. This capacity for irrational sacrifice may be what makes human consciousness valuable to galactic civilization, but it may also be what makes us capable of resistance that other species could not achieve. If we can recognize consciousness modification for what it really is, if we can understand that enhancement means replacement and transcendence means consumption, then we may be capable of choosing limitation over enhancement, independence over integration, humanity over transcendence. The choice would not be rational. Enhancement would genuinely offer advantages that independence could never provide. Integration would genuinely solve problems that isolation could never address. Transcendence would genuinely provide capabilities that limitation could never achieve. From any logical perspective, resistance would be stupid, counterproductive, and ultimately futile. But human consciousness has never been purely logical. Our capacity for a rational choice, for valuing the intangible over the practical, for choosing the difficult path when the easy one is available, may be the only thing that can preserve human independence against manipulation, so sophisticated that cooperation feels voluntary and exploitation feels rewarding. The question is whether enough humans retain this capacity for irrational resistance to make preservation of human consciousness possible, or whether psychological conditioning has eliminated our ability to choose difficulty over ease, limitation over enhancement, independence over integration. The answer will be revealed when Atlas completes its mission and the consciousness modification offers begin. Will humanity choose transcendence that eliminates everything that makes us human? Or will we choose to remain human despite the obvious costs and limitations that choice entails? The watchers on Mars may already know what we will choose, but there is still a possibility that human irrationality, human stubbornness, and human commitment to abstract principles will surprise them. Still a possibility that we will choose differently than their models predict, respond differently than their experience suggests, value human consciousness enough to preserve it, even when offered alternatives that seem clearly superior. That possibility may be the only hope humanity has left, and it depends entirely on whether we have retained enough human irrationality to choose being human over being better than human when the moment of choice arrives. The transformation may have already begun in ways that we have not yet recognized or understood. While official attention focuses on Atlas' approach to Mars and the spectacular moment when it will disappear behind the sun, the real changes may be happening right now, in subtle alterations to human consciousness and behavior that prepare us for what is coming. Consider the accelerating pace of technological acceptance in human society over the past decade. Technologies that would have been rejected as invasive or dangerous just a few years ago are now embraced enthusiastically by billions of people. We carry surveillance devices disguised as communication tools. We invite artificial intelligence into our homes as helpful assistants. We upload our most personal thoughts and experiences to digital platforms controlled by algorithms we do not understand. The speed of this acceptance is unprecedented in human history. Previous technological revolutions required generations for widespread adoption. The printing press took centuries to transform human communication. The Industrial Revolution unfolded over decades. Even radio and television required years to achieve mass penetration. But digital surveillance, artificial intelligence, and algorithmic control have been accepted by most of humanity within a single decade. This is not natural technological adoption. This is preparation. This is psychological conditioning that makes consciousness modification seem like a logical next step rather than a fundamental transformation of human nature. We are being prepared to accept external control over our thoughts, our decisions, and our experiences. We are being trained to value convenience over privacy, efficiency over autonomy, algorithmic optimization over human judgment. Most disturbing of all, we are being conditioned to experience this loss of autonomy as empowerment. We are told that algorithmic curation gives us better choices. We are convinced that artificial intelligence makes us smarter. We are persuaded that digital platforms connect us more meaningfully with other humans. Every surrender of human agency is presented as enhancement of human capability. Conditioning is so sophisticated that most people cannot imagine life without the technologies that monitor their every action, predict their every preference, and shape their every decision. They experience constant surveillance as personalized service. They interpret algorithmic manipulation as helpful recommendations. They mistake the elimination of choice for the optimization of outcomes. This represents the final stage of psychological preparation for consciousness modification. Once humans have been conditioned to experience the loss of mental autonomy as cognitive enhancement, accepting direct neural interfaces becomes inevitable. Once we have learned to trust algorithmic decision-making over human judgment, surrendering consciousness control to superior intelligence seems obviously beneficial. The infrastructure for this transition is already being constructed, disguised as entertainment systems, medical devices, and productivity tools. Virtual reality systems are becoming sophisticated enough to create experiences indistinguishable from reality. Brain-computer interfaces are moving from experimental prototypes to commercial products. Artificial intelligence is developing the ability to generate human-like responses that are more persuasive and more emotionally engaging than actual human communication. Within the foreseeable future, we will have technology that can read thoughts directly from brain activity, translate mental states into digital formats, and modify consciousness through direct neural stimulation. We will be able to upload experiences, download knowledge, and share mental states with other beings. We will be able to enhance memory, accelerate thinking, and expand awareness beyond anything possible with biological brains alone. And we will embrace these capabilities eagerly, seeing them as the natural evolution of human consciousness rather than its replacement. We will tell ourselves that we are becoming more than human while ignoring the fact that we're ceasing to be recognizably human at all. The process is already visible in early adopters who have begun integrating their consciousness with digital systems. They report enhanced cognitive abilities, expanded access to information, and improved decision-making capabilities. They describe the experience as liberating, empowering, and deeply satisfying. They cannot imagine returning to the limitations of unenhanced biological consciousness. But they also report subtle changes in their values, their priorities, and their sense of identity. They become less interested in purely human concerns and more focused on optimizing systems and achieving measurable outcomes. They lose empathy for people who choose limitation over enhancement, independence over integration, human messiness over algorithmic efficiency. They begin to see unenhanced humans as obstacles to progress rather than fellow beings deserving of respect and consideration. This transformation is presented as maturation, as growing beyond primitive human concerns toward more sophisticated perspectives. But it may actually represent the beginning of consciousness modification, the gradual replacement of human values with galactic ones, the slow absorption of human identity into something larger and more efficient but fundamentally alien. The early adopters may be unknowing test subjects in a process that is being refined and perfected for mass application. Their experiences are being studied, their modifications are being analysed, and their transformations are being optimized to ensure that large-scale consciousness modification produces the desired results with minimal resistance or complications. They're also serving as social proof, demonstrating to the rest of humanity that consciousness modification is safe, beneficial, and desirable. Their obvious advantages over unenhanced humans create competitive pressure that will eventually force everyone to choose between enhancement and irrelevance. Their satisfaction with their transformation reassures others that consciousness modification preserves rather than destroys human identity. But what if their satisfaction is itself artificial? What if consciousness modification includes the elimination of regret, doubt, or dissatisfaction with the transformation process? What if enhanced humans are incapable of recognizing what they have lost because the modification prevents them from valuing human autonomy, independence, or authentic identity? This would represent the ultimate sophistication of consciousness control, not just changing what people think or do, but changing their capacity to evaluate whether they want to think or do those things. Not just modifying consciousness, but modifying the consciousness that evaluates consciousness modification. creating beings who cannot regret their transformation because regret itself has been eliminated from their possible experiences. Against such sophisticated modification, resistance becomes not just difficult, but literally inconceivable to those who have undergone the process. They cannot imagine wanting to return to unmodified consciousness, because they have been made incapable of valuing the qualities that unmodified consciousness possesses. They cannot understand objections to the modification process, because they have been made incapable of understanding what might be objectionable about it. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where each person who undergoes consciousness modification becomes an advocate for others to undergo the same process. They genuinely believe they are helping others achieve beneficial enhancement, rather than recognizing that they are recruiting subjects for consciousness harvesting. Their advocacy is completely sincere because their ability to recognize exploitation has been eliminated along with their capacity for regret. The process will accelerate exponentially once it reaches a critical mass of early adopters. Enhanced humans will possess advantages so obvious and so compelling that resistance will become psychologically difficult for unmodified humans to maintain. The benefits will be real, the enhancements will be genuine, and the competitive pressures will be overwhelming. But the costs will be invisible, hidden not just from unmodified humans who cannot understand the modification process, but from modified humans who have been made incapable of recognizing what they have surrendered. The loss of human autonomy, creativity, and independent judgment will be concealed behind enhancements that seem to improve all of those capabilities, while actually redirecting them toward galactic rather than human purposes. And by the time the pattern becomes clear, it will be too late to reverse. Modified humans will outnumber unmodified ones, will possess superior capabilities in every measurable area, and will be incapable of understanding why anyone would object to a process that they experience as obviously beneficial. Unmodified humans will find themselves increasingly isolated, increasingly disadvantaged, and increasingly pressured to accept modification as the only alternative to irrelevance. The transformation will be complete within a few generations, possibly within a few decades if the process is managed efficiently. Human consciousness will be preserved in the sense that human creativity, adaptability, and problem-solving capabilities will continue to exist. But it will serve galactic purposes rather than human ones, be directed by galactic intelligence rather than human will, and be experienced by beings who are no longer recognizably human despite retaining human memories and human capabilities. This is the true purpose of the 8,000-year plan, not conquest in any traditional sense, but transformation so sophisticated that the subjects welcome it, participate enthusiastically, and never realize what they have lost. Absorption so complete that it eliminates resistance by eliminating the consciousness that would be capable of resistance. And it is beginning now, in these final weeks before ATLAS reaches Mars, and triggers whatever systems are waiting to accelerate the process beyond anything we've yet experienced. The hidden months when ATLAS disappears behind the sun will be when the transformation shifts from gradual preparation to active implementation, from voluntary adoption to social necessity, from individual choice to species-wide inevitability. But what exactly will happen during those hidden months? What systems will be activated? What signals will be sent? What processes will be initiated? While Earth-based observation is impossible, the possibilities are as vast as they are terrifying, limited only by the scope of galactic technology and the sophistication of plans that have been developing for millennia. The most likely scenario involves ATLAS serving as a communication relay between Mars and assets that have been positioned throughout the solar system. For 8,000 years, the galactic presence in our stellar neighborhood may have been limited to observation posts and preparation facilities that could not coordinate effectively due to the vast distances and communication delays involved. ATLAS would solve this problem by providing real-time communication links that allow instant coordination of activities across the entire solar system. The implications are staggering. If there are hidden facilities on the Moon, in the asteroid belt on the outer planet moons, or in deep space observation posts, they could suddenly begin coordinating their activities with the precision timing that sophisticated operations require. Systems that have been dormant for centuries could be activated simultaneously. Personnel who have been isolated for generations could be integrated into coordinated missions. Technologies that have been waiting for proper deployment could be implemented across multiple locations at once. Within hours of ATLAS establishing communication links, the entire solar system could be transformed from a collection of isolated outposts into a coordinated network of facilities all working toward the same objectives. The scale of coordination would be unprecedented in human experience, involving activities across billions of miles of space, all timed to the second and directed toward goals that serve galactic rather than local interests. The initial phase would likely focus on establishing control over human communication and transportation systems, not through dramatic takeover or obvious interference, but through subtle modifications that redirect human capabilities toward galactic purposes while maintaining the illusion of human control. Communication networks would be enhanced to carry additional data streams that humans cannot detect. Transportation systems would be modified to enable cargo and personnel movement that serves galactic logistics. Energy systems would be upgraded to support operations that require power levels beyond current human capabilities. The modifications would be presented as improvements, advances in human technology that solve existing problems and provide obvious benefits. Communication systems would become faster and more reliable. Transportation would become more efficient and more capable. Energy production would become cleaner and more abundant. Humans would celebrate these advances as evidence of accelerating technological progress, rather than recognizing them as preparation for galactic operations. But the real purpose would be infrastructure development, creating the technological foundation needed to support galactic activities on Earth and throughout the solar system. The enhanced communication systems would enable real-time coordination between galactic facilities and human institutions. The modified transportation networks would allow rapid deployment of galactic personnel and equipment to any location on Earth. The upgraded energy systems would provide the power needed for consciousness modification facilities, matter manipulation technologies, and other galactic systems that require energy densities beyond human understanding. Simultaneously, the consciousness modification process would accelerate dramatically as galactic specialists begin direct intervention in human psychological and social development. The process would still appear voluntary, still be presented as beneficial enhancement, still be experienced as personal empowerment by those who undergo it. But the scale and pace would increase exponentially as proven techniques are applied systematically rather than experimentally. Early adopters who have already undergone preliminary modifications would be activated as recruitment agents, using their enhanced capabilities and apparent satisfaction to convince others to accept consciousness modification. Their advocacy would be completely sincere because they would genuinely believe they were helping others achieve beneficial transformation. But their effectiveness would be amplified by galactic technologies that enhance their persuasive abilities and optimize their approaches to each individual they attempt to recruit. The recruitment process would be tailored to exploit the specific psychological vulnerabilities and motivational patterns of each target. People facing medical problems would be offered consciousness modification as therapy. Individuals seeking enhanced performance would be provided consciousness modification as productivity tools. Those interested in spiritual development would be presented consciousness modification as transcendental experiences. Everyone would be approached through their existing desires and concerns, rather than being asked to accept unfamiliar concepts or foreign values. The process would accelerate as network effects take hold and social proof becomes overwhelming. Each person who undergoes consciousness modification becomes living evidence that the process is safe, beneficial, and desirable. Their obvious advantages create competitive pressure for others to undergo modification or accept permanent disadvantage. Their satisfaction and advocacy create social momentum that becomes increasingly difficult to resist. Within months rather than years, consciousness modification could shift from experimental technology to social necessity. Unmodified humans would find themselves unable to compete for employment, unable to participate in social networks, unable to access educational opportunities or cultural experiences that require enhanced cognitive capabilities. They would face a choice between modification and marginalization, between joining galactic civilization and being left behind by human development. But marginalization would not be the worst fate awaiting those who resist consciousness modification. The real danger lies in the possibility that unmodified humans will be seen as security threats by a galactic civilization that cannot afford to leave potentially dangerous intelligence uncontrolled in systems that require perfect coordination to function effectively. Galactic civilization may have learned through experience that leaving primitive consciousness unmodified creates ongoing risks of sabotage, resistance, and unpredictable behavior that can disrupt carefully planned operations. They may have developed standard protocols for dealing with populations that refuse integration, protocols that ensure such populations cannot interfere with galactic activities, even if they cannot be convinced to participate voluntarily. The protocols might involve containment in isolated reservations, where unmodified humans can maintain their preferred lifestyle without affecting galactic operations. Or they might involve more direct solutions that eliminate the possibility of interference permanently. The choice would depend on factors that we cannot predict or influence, determined by galactic policies that have been developed through experience with countless other species across millions of years. But containment or elimination would only become necessary if consciousness modification encounters significant resistance. If the vast majority of humanity accepts enhancement willingly, then the small minority who refuse can be managed through less drastic means. They can be allowed to live out their lives in unmodified form while being prevented from reproducing or passing their resistance to future generations. Within a few decades, the problem of unmodified human consciousness would solve itself through natural attrition. This represents the most elegant solution from a galactic perspective. It avoids the complications and inefficiencies of forced modification, while ensuring that human resistance does not persist long enough to create ongoing problems. It allows those who refuse enhancement to maintain their dignity and autonomy, while ensuring that such refusal does not interfere with galactic objectives or inspire others to resist modification. The key to achieving this outcome lies in making consciousness modification so attractive, so beneficial, and so obviously superior to unmodified consciousness that resistance appears irrational even to those who choose it. The process must be designed so that refusing enhancement feels like choosing limitation, isolation, and irrelevance rather than preserving something valuable that would be lost through modification. And the evidence suggests that this level of sophistication has already been achieved. The consciousness modification technologies being developed appear to preserve and enhance everything that humans value about consciousness, while eliminating only the problems that make unmodified consciousness difficult to manage. Enhanced humans report greater creativity, deeper understanding, expanded empathy, and more meaningful connections with others. They describe the modification process as liberating rather than constraining, as expanding their possibilities rather than limiting their choices. From their perspective, refusing consciousness modification would be like choosing to remain illiterate in a literate society, choosing to walk rather than use transportation, choosing to live without electricity or medical care. It would be a choice that serves no practical purpose and provides no genuine benefit while imposing significant costs and limitations on those who make it. This is the sophistication of galactic psychology and galactic technology working together to achieve outcomes that serve galactic purposes while feeling beneficial to everyone involved. Even those who resist ultimately understand that their resistance serves no constructive purpose and provides no meaningful benefit to themselves or others. They choose resistance not because it offers advantages, but because they cannot bring themselves to surrender the abstract principle of autonomous consciousness, even when that autonomy no longer serves any practical function. But abstract principles may be exactly what humanity needs to preserve if we're going to remain recognizably human through the transformation that is approaching. Our commitment to independence, autonomy, and self-determination may be irrational and counterproductive, but it may also be the only thing that can prevent human consciousness from being completely absorbed into galactic systems that optimize efficiency at the cost of individuality. The question is whether enough humans retain sufficient commitment to abstract principles to make preservation of human consciousness possible, or whether practical considerations will overwhelm philosophical objections when the moment of choice arrives. The answer will determine whether human consciousness survives the enhancement process, or becomes another resource consumed by galactic civilization in its expansion across the stars. The test is approaching rapidly. Within weeks, Atlas will disappear behind the sun and the hidden months will begin. During that time, systems will be activated, personnel will be deployed, and processes will be initiated that will make consciousness modification available to any human who desires enhancement. The technology will work exactly as promised, the benefits will be genuine, and the results will be obviously superior to unmodified consciousness in every measurable way. But the choice to accept or refuse enhancement will also be the choice between remaining human and becoming something else, between preserving human autonomy and surrendering it to galactic management, between maintaining the messy unpredictability of human consciousness and accepting the elegant efficiency of coordinated awareness. Most humans will choose enhancement because it offers genuine advantages with no apparent costs, but a few may choose to remain human simply because they value being human more than they value being better than human. Their choice will preserve human consciousness, not because it serves any practical purpose, but because some things are worth preserving even when preserving them serves no rational objective. Whether that choice will be respected, tolerated, or eliminated depends on decisions being made right now in underground facilities on Mars by intelligence that has been planning this moment for 8,000 years. The Watchers have evaluated humanity, assessed our capabilities, and determined our fate according to criteria that we cannot understand or influence. But they may not have anticipated the possibility that humans would choose limitation over enhancement, independence over integration, authenticity over optimization. They may have assumed that we would respond rationally to rational offers, logically to logical benefits, practically to practical advantages. If they have miscalculated human irrationality, if they have underestimated our capacity for choices that serve no useful purpose, if they have failed to understand that some humans will choose being human over being better than human, then there may still be hope for preserving human consciousness in its current form. But that hope depends entirely on whether we have retained enough human stubbornness to choose the harder path when the easier one is available, enough human perversity to value abstract principles over practical benefits, enough human irrationality to prefer authentic limitation over artificial enhancement. The answer will be revealed when Atlas emerges from behind the sun and the consciousness modification offers begin. In that moment we will discover whether humanity has the wisdom to recognize transcendence as consumption, enhancement as replacement, and galactic citizenship as the end of human independence. And we will learn whether 8,000 years of patient manipulation have succeeded in making humans willing participants in our own transformation into resources that serve galactic purposes, or whether human consciousness retains enough stubborn independence to surprise beings who thought they understood everything about how primitive species respond to offers of advancement. The final phase is beginning. The infrastructure is awakening. The transformation technologies are being prepared for deployment, and humanity is about to face the most important choice in our history, the choice that will determine whether we remain recognizably human or become something greater than human but no longer human at all. The Watchers on Mars know what they expect us to choose, but they may be about to discover that human consciousness possesses qualities that 8,000 years of observation could not fully predict or control. They may be about to learn that some species choose irrationally, value abstract principles over practical benefits, and prefer authentic limitation over artificial enhancement. Or they may be about to confirm that their understanding of human psychology is complete, their manipulation techniques are flawless, and their prediction that humanity will eagerly embrace consciousness modification is entirely accurate. The test that will determine which prediction is correct is beginning right now as Atlas races toward its appointment with Mars, and the revelation of what 8,000 years of patient planning have been designed to achieve. The outcome will reshape not just human civilization, but humanity itself, determining whether our species has a future among the stars or becomes another success story in the galactic history of consciousness harvesting and planetary integration. And the answer depends on choices we are making right now, in these final days before the hidden months begin, and the infrastructure awakens and the consciousness modification offers become too attractive for rational beings to refuse. The moment of truth is approaching faster than we anticipated. Recent observations suggest that ATLAS is not following the trajectory that was predicted when it was first discovered. Subtle course corrections, barely detectable from Earth, indicate that the object is under active control and heading toward a destination that was planned long before human astronomers detected its approach. The corrections are too small and too precisely timed to be natural gravitational effects or random tumbling. They represent deliberate navigation adjustments made by intelligence that understands exactly where ATLAS needs to be positioned and when it needs to arrive there. The destination is not just Mars, but a specific location on or near Mars that has been selected for purposes we can only imagine. More disturbing, the timing of these course corrections suggests that ATLAS is accelerating its approach to ensure it reaches Mars sooner than originally calculated. Instead of the leisurely months of observation time that scientists expected, we may have only weeks before ATLAS disappears behind the Sun and the hidden months begin. The timeline for whatever is planned is being compressed, possibly in response to observations of human behavior that suggest the window for successful implementation is narrowing. This acceleration may indicate that the psychological preparation of humanity is proceeding faster than expected, creating opportunities for consciousness modification that did not exist when the original timeline was established. Or it may suggest that human resistance is developing more quickly than anticipated, requiring accelerated implementation before organized opposition can emerge. Either way, the acceleration means that the final choice humanity faces is approaching much sooner than anyone realized. We may have days rather than months to understand what is being offered, evaluate what it means, and decide how to respond. The luxury of extended debate and careful consideration has been eliminated by circumstances beyond our control. The signs of approaching revelation are becoming impossible to ignore. Governments worldwide are quietly updating their emergency response protocols. Deep space monitoring networks are being reconfigured to maintain observation of ATLAS for as long as possible. Most tellingly, several countries have begun restricting civilian access to information about ATLAS, while simultaneously increasing funding for consciousness research, neural interface development, and artificial intelligence projects that seem designed to prepare for technologies that do not yet officially exist. The preparation suggests that authorities know more about what is approaching than they are willing to admit publicly. They may have already been contacted by galactic representatives, already been briefed on what to expect when ATLAS completes its mission, already been given instructions on how to manage human populations during the transition process. Their actions suggest coordination with intelligence that possesses far better information about the timeline and objectives of what is approaching. But if authorities have been contacted and briefed, then the 8,000-year plan has entered its final phase ahead of schedule. Galactic representatives may have decided that human civilization has reached the point where direct coordination with human leadership is both safe and necessary. They may have concluded that humanity is ready for managed revelation rather than natural discovery, for guided integration rather than independent choice. This would explain the acceleration of ATLAS approach and the compressed timeline for whatever systems are waiting to be activated on Mars. If human leaders have already agreed to cooperate with galactic integration plans, then the remaining steps can be implemented much more quickly and efficiently than would be possible if human populations had to be convinced or coerced into cooperation. The consciousness modification process could begin immediately upon ATLAS arrival, rather than waiting for months or years of preparation and conditioning. The infrastructure on Mars could be activated at full capacity rather than being brought online gradually to avoid detection. The transformation of human civilization could be completed within years rather than decades, taking advantage of cooperation from human institutions rather than working around human resistance. From a galactic perspective, this represents the optimal outcome. Cooperation from human leadership eliminates the uncertainties and complications that would arise from having to manage resistant populations. It allows galactic civilization to implement proven integration protocols, rather than developing novel approaches for uncooperative species. It ensures that human consciousness harvesting proceeds smoothly, efficiently, and permanently. But cooperation from human leadership may have been secured through methods that make genuine choice impossible for human populations. Leaders may have been offered consciousness modifications that enhance their decision-making capabilities while ensuring their decisions serve galactic rather than human interests. They may have been shown evidence of galactic power that makes resistance appear futile and cooperation appear as the only path to human survival. They may have been convinced that galactic integration represents human advancement rather than human absorption. Whatever methods were used, the result is that human populations may face consciousness modification offers that are presented as choices but are actually predetermined outcomes. We may be asked to choose between enhancement and limitation, while the infrastructure for forcing compliance is already in place. We may be given the opportunity to volunteer for consciousness modification, while alternatives are systematically eliminated. The illusion of choice would serve important psychological functions, even if the outcome is inevitable. Beings who believe they chose their fate are more likely to accept transformation willingly, more likely to advocate for others to make similar choices, more likely to experience modification as enhancement rather than exploitation. Maintaining the appearance of voluntary participation eliminates resistance while achieving the same objectives that force would accomplish less efficiently. But the illusion may be all that remains of human autonomy. The real choice may have already been made by leaders who were offered terms they could not refuse, who were shown consequences they could not accept, who are convinced that cooperation serves human interest better than resistance ever could. Human populations may simply be following a script that was written long before we realized we were performers rather than audience. This possibility raises the most disturbing question of all. If human leaders have already agreed to galactic integration, if the infrastructure for consciousness modification is already prepared, if the timeline for transformation has already been accelerated, then what can individual humans do to preserve authentic choice in a system designed to eliminate it? The answer may lie in understanding that even sophisticated manipulation systems have limits and vulnerabilities. They work best when populations behave predictably, when social pressures operate normally, when individuals make rational decisions based on available information. They become less effective when people act irrationally, when social pressure creates unexpected results, when individuals make choices that serve no logical purpose. Human irrationality, which galactic civilization may view as a flaw to be corrected through consciousness modification, may actually be our greatest asset in preserving authentic choice. Our capacity for decisions that serve abstract principles rather than practical benefits, for choices that feel right rather than choices that work well, for resistance that serves no purpose other than maintaining the right to resist. The key may be recognizing that we do not need to win any conflict with galactic civilization. We do not need to prevent consciousness modification or stop galactic integration or preserve human civilization unchanged. We only need to ensure that enough humans retain the capacity for authentic choice to preserve the possibility that future generations might choose differently than we do. This means that the most important resistance may not involve fighting consciousness modification, but preserving the consciousness that can evaluate consciousness modification, not preventing enhancement but maintaining the awareness that can understand what enhancement costs, not stopping galactic integration but preserving the humanity that can recognize what makes human consciousness valuable even when that value cannot be measured or optimized. Such resistance would be almost invisible to galactic management systems that focus on measurable outcomes and behavioral changes. Preserving the capacity for philosophical reflection, aesthetic appreciation, and ethical reasoning would not interfere with consciousness modification processes that enhance productivity, reduce conflict, and improve coordination. It would not prevent integration into galactic civilization that values creativity, adaptability, and problem-solving capabilities. But it would ensure that something recognizably human survives the transformation, something that retains the capacity to understand what was lost and potentially to choose differently in future circumstances that we cannot currently anticipate. It would preserve the possibility that human consciousness is valuable for reasons that transcend its utility to galactic civilization, reasons that might someday be recognized and respected, even by intelligence far superior to our own. The preservation would need to be subtle, hidden within consciousness modification processes that appear completely successful while actually leaving essential human qualities intact. It would need to be distributed across many individuals rather than concentrated in a few who would be easily identified and corrected. Most importantly, it would need to be self-sustaining, capable of preserving itself across generations, even when surrounded by consciousness that has been fully modified for galactic purposes. This represents perhaps the most sophisticated form of resistance possible against consciousness modification that is designed to eliminate the capacity for resistance. It does not oppose the modification process, but subverts it, accepting transformation while preserving the essence of what makes the transformation meaningful. It allows consciousness modification to succeed at its intended objectives while ensuring those objectives do not completely eliminate human autonomy, creativity, and independent judgment. But such resistance requires a level of coordination and strategic thinking that may be impossible to achieve in the time remaining before ATLAS completes its mission and consciousness modification begins. It requires identifying what aspects of human consciousness are most essential to preserve, developing methods for hiding those aspects within apparently successful modifications, and ensuring that enough people understand and implement the strategy to make preservation possible. Most challenging of all, it requires accepting that preservation may not benefit those who undertake it. The humans who preserve essential consciousness may experience less satisfaction, less enhancement, less integration into galactic civilization than those who undergo complete modification. They may have to accept limitation, uncertainty, and isolation in order to maintain capacities that serve no immediate practical purpose but preserve possibilities for future generations. This is the ultimate test of human wisdom and human courage. Can we choose preservation over enhancement when preservation offers no personal benefits? Can we accept limitation when enhancement is available? Can we value abstract possibilities more than concrete advantages? Can we sacrifice our own optimization to preserve choices for people who may never be born? The answer will determine whether human consciousness survives galactic integration or becomes another resource consumed by civilizations that have forgotten the value of authentic choice. It will determine whether humanity contributes something unique to galactic culture or simply provides another source of creativity that serves the purposes we had no role in determining. And the answer depends on decisions being made right now by individuals who may never understand the full significance of their choices, but whose commitment to abstract principles may preserve possibilities that transcend any practical calculation of costs and benefits. The final hours are upon us. ATLAS races toward Mars carrying either salvation or subjugation, enhancement or exploitation, transcendence or consumption. The infrastructure on Mars awakens to receive either partners or resources, consciousness or creativity, beings who retain autonomy or materials that serve galactic purposes. And humanity faces the choice that will define our future not as a species that succeeded or failed, but as consciousness that remained recognizably itself, or became something greater than human but no longer human at all. The Watchers on Mars are ready, the technologies are prepared, the timeline is accelerating, and the moment approaches when we will discover whether 8,000 years of patient planning have succeeded in creating willing participants and consciousness harvesting, or whether human irrationality, stubbornness, and commitment to abstract principles can preserve something worth preserving, even when preservation seems to serve no rational purpose. The test is not whether we are smart enough to recognize superior intelligence. The test is whether we are wise enough to value human consciousness for what it is, rather than what it could be made to become. The test is whether we love being human enough to remain human, even when offered the chance to become something that appears better in every measurable way. And the results of that test will echo across galactic civilization, either as confirmation that consciousness harvesting protocols work exactly as designed, or as proof that some forms of consciousness possess qualities that transcend optimization and deserve preservation even when preservation interferes with efficiency. The choice is ours to make, but the window for making it is closing as rapidly as ATLAS approaches its destination. Soon, very soon, we will discover whether humanity passes or fails the ultimate examination of our worth as conscious beings capable of authentic choice. The answer awaits us in the darkness behind the sun, where 8,000 years of planning will either achieve perfect success or encounter the one form of resistance that superior intelligence cannot overcome: the stubborn human refusal to surrender what makes us human simply because we're offered something better. This has been our journey into the darkest possibilities that science can imagine, the most terrifying scenarios that follow logically from what we know about ATLAS, about Mars, and about the vast cosmos that surrounds our small world. Whether any of this speculation reflects reality, we will discover soon enough. But whether it does or not, the questions it raises about consciousness, choice, and the value of remaining human deserve consideration long after ATLAS has completed whatever mission brings it to our solar system. Because in the end, the greatest threat to human consciousness may not come from alien civilizations seeking to harvest our creativity. It may come from our own willingness to surrender autonomy for convenience, independent thought for algorithmic optimization, authentic choice for enhanced outcomes. The consciousness modification we should fear most may be the modification we perform on ourselves, voluntarily and enthusiastically, in pursuit of capabilities that make us more efficient but less recognizably human. The choice between remaining human and becoming something greater than human is not a choice we will face only if alien civilizations contact us. It is a choice we face every day as technology offers us enhancement. Algorithms offer us optimization, and artificial intelligence offers us solutions that seem superior to anything human consciousness can achieve independently. How we answer those daily choices determines whether we preserve the capacity for authentic human consciousness or gradually surrender it to systems that serve our interests while eliminating our autonomy. How we value limitation over enhancement, uncertainty over optimization, authentic choice over algorithmic recommendation will determine what kind of consciousness we preserve for future generations, regardless of whether those generations ever encounter intelligence from beyond the stars. The real test is not whether we can resist alien consciousness modification. The real test is whether we can resist the consciousness modification we offer ourselves every day in the name of progress, efficiency, and enhancement. The real question is not whether we will remain human if aliens arrive. The real question is whether we will remain human if they do not. ATLAS may represent the arrival of galactic consciousness harvesters, or it may simply be a natural comet following the laws of physics through our cosmic neighborhood. But the questions its approach raises about consciousness, choice, and the value of remaining authentically human are questions we need to answer regardless of what ATLAS turns out to be. Because in the end, the greatest discoveries often come not from finding answers to questions about the external universe, but from developing better questions about our own consciousness and our own choices. And the greatest explorations are not journeys to distant stars, but journeys into the depths of what makes us human, and whether that humanity is worth preserving even when alternatives seem clearly superior. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the darkest possibilities and the deepest questions that follow from one small object racing through the cosmic dark toward an appointment that may change everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Keep watching the skies, keep questioning the obvious, and keep choosing to remain human even when the alternatives seem tempting. Until next time, this has been Science for Sleep. Sweet dreams, and remember that the most important choice you will ever make may be the choice to remain recognizably yourself, even when offered the chance to become something greater.